Okay, imagine this. You're at a cafe, just eavesdropping on the conversation at the next table.
Yeah.
And they're like, my car broke down.
Oh, no.
I'm totally running out of time. I just want to give up and go home.
Classic.
And you're thinking, wait, what's with all these verbs and prepositions? It's like a secret code.
Right. It's phrasal verbs galore.
Exactly. So that's what we're diving into today, phrasal verbs.
Those tricky little combos that can make or break your fluency.
We're going deep with this awesome guide to the top 10 most frequently used phrasal verbs.
Which I'm excited to unpack with you.
Because once you master these, you'll sound so much more natural.
It's like leveling up your English, you know?
Totally. So first up, get up.
Ah, the classic.
Seems pretty basic, right? I mean, it's like, getting out of bed.
Yeah, the guide defines it as rising from bed or a sitting position.
Right, but I feel like there's more to it.
Oh, there always is with phrasal verbs.
Like you might get up for work, but you might get yourself up after a tough workout,
Exactly, that yourself adds a little extra oomph.
Right, like you're really pushing through.
All about the nuance.
I love it. Okay, so the practice sentence here asks, what time do you get up on weekends?
Ooh, good question.
What about you? Are you an early bird or do you sleep in?
Weekends are for sleeping in.
Same here.
Definitely.
Okay, moving on to turn on and turn off.
These are like the bread and butter of phrasal verbs.
Right. I mean, we're constantly turning things on and off.
Lights, TVs, phones, you name it.
The guide gives us the classic examples like, can you turn on the lights? And don't forget to turn off the TV.
Simple but essential.
But I'm curious, is there anything interesting about the history of these, given how tied they are to technology?
That's a really good point. You wouldn't have had turn on the TV a couple hundred years ago.
Right.
It shows how language adapts to new inventions.
And I bet there are tons of new phrasal verbs popping up now with all the tech we have. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's stick with the guide's practice sentence. I turned off my phone during the meeting.
Ooh, the digital detox.
Have you ever done that, or are you someone who's constantly checking their phone, even in meetings?
I try to be present and turn it off, but sometimes it's hard.
I feel you. The temptation is real.
It is.
Okay, next up is look after.
Which means to take care of someone or something.
Right. But again, I feel like there are different levels to this.
No, absolutely. It's not just about glancing at something. It's about responsibility and care.
The guide's example is, can you look after my dog while I'm on vacation?
A classic pet sitting request.
But it's not just about watching the dog. It's about making sure they're fed, walked, loved.
Exactly. It's a deeper level of care.
The practice sentence for this one is, it's not easy to look after 3 kids at once.
Ooh, that's a whole other level.
Can you imagine?
Definitely a juggling act.
Speaking of juggling acts, have you ever felt like you were running out of time, energy, patience, maybe even coffee?
Oh, all the time.
That brings us to our next phrasal verb, run out of.
Which can be used in so many situations.
Right. The guide defines it as using up all of something.
And it often has that sense of urgency or need, like, we're running out of milk.
Or I'm running out of time to finish this project.
Exactly. It captures that feeling of depletion.
And it doesn't always have to be physical things. You can run out of ideas, motivation.
Even patience, like we were just talking about.
The guide's example is, we've run out of milk. Can you buy some more?
A classic grocery list problem.
Happens all the time in my house.
I bet.
Okay, so the practice sentence asks, I ran out of ideas during the brainstorming session.
Oof, I've been there.
Have you ever hit that wall creatively?
Oh, yeah, especially in high-pressure situations.
It's like your brain just shuts down.
Totally.
Okay, ready for a quick wardrobe change?
Always.
Because next up, we have put on and take off, which are all about clothing.
And accessories. Don't forget the accessories.
Right. The guide keeps it simple. Put on is to wear something. Take off is to remove it.
Like, we put on our shoes in the morning.
And take off our jackets when we come inside.
But sometimes we even put on a brave face.
Or take off our metaphorical hats to someone.
It's amazing how they can be used both literally and figuratively.
The guide's examples are, it's cold outside, put on your jacket.
Good advice.
And she took off her shoes before entering the house.
Always a good idea.
Do you always take off your shoes when you go inside?
I try to. Yeah, it just feels more comfortable.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, the practice sentence for this one is, I always put on sunscreen before going to the beach.
Sun protection is key.
What about you? What's your essential put on before hitting the beach?
A good hat is a must for me.
Smart.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to a phrasal verb that can be a bit tricky. Give up.
Yeah, this one has both positive and negative connotations.
Right. I mean, you can give up on something because it's too hard.
Or you can give up something that's no longer serving you,
The guide defines it as to stop trying or quit something.
which can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the situation.
Their example is very motivational, though. Never give up on your dreams.
It's a good reminder to persevere.
But sometimes knowing when to give up is just as important.
Absolutely. Like if you're constantly banging your head against a wall.
Right. Maybe try a different door.
Exactly. Sometimes giving up opens up new possibilities.
I love that perspective. Okay, the practice sentence for give up is a bit more personal. I wanted to learn guitar, but I gave up after a few months.
Oh, I relate to that.
Have you ever had that experience with a hobby or a skill you were trying to learn?
Oh, yeah. I tried learning to knit once, and it just wasn't happening.
It's okay to admit defeat sometimes.
Totally.
All right. Ready for a phrasal verb that can be both literal and figurative?
Bring it on.
Okay, it's break down.
This one can refer to everything from cars to emotional meltdowns.
Right, like your car can break down on the freeway.
Or you can have a breakdown when you hear bad news.
Two very different scenarios, but the same phrasal verb ties them together.
It's all about context.
Exactly. Okay, the guide's practice sentence asks, what do you usually do when your computer breaks down?
Ooh, the dreaded blue screen of death.
Do you have a go-to solution or do you panic?
I try to troubleshoot it myself, but I'm not afraid to call for help.
Same here. Sometimes you just need a tech guru to save the day.
For sure.
Speaking of saving the day, have you ever had to pick someone up from the airport last minute?
Oh, yeah. It happens all the time.
That's like the classic friend move, right?
Definitely.
Which brings us to our next phrasal verb, pick up.
Which, as we've just hinted at, can mean to collect someone or something.
But it also has a few other meanings.
Like to lift something off the ground.
Or to learn something quickly.
It's a multi-talented phrasal verb.
But guides examples are, pick up that book off the floor.
For the literal meaning.
And I'll pick you up from the airport. For the collecting meaning.
It's all about context.
Okay, to get your brain working on all those different meanings, the practice sentence is, she picked up the book and started reading.
Ooh, getting lost in a good book.
What was the last thing you picked up?
I picked up a new cookbook the other day.
Nice. What kind of cuisine?
It's all about Mediterranean dishes.
Ooh, sounds delicious.
It is.
Maybe you can pick me up from the airport sometime when we can have a Mediterranean feast.
Yeah.
Speaking of picking things up, how do you usually find out about new restaurants or events in your city?
Ooh, that's a good question. I usually rely on word of mouth and social media.
Which perfectly segues into our next phrasal verb, find out.
Which is all about uncovering information and satisfying our curiosity.
It's like being a detective in the world of language.
Exactly. We're constantly trying to find things out, whether it's big news or just what our friends are up to.
The guide's example is, I need to find out what time the train leaves.
Very practical.
But it can also be about deeper discoveries, you know?
Absolutely.
Okay, the guy's practice sentence is, how did you find out about the concert?
That makes me think about all the different ways we consume information these days.
So what are your go-to sources for finding out about cool stuff happening?
I think it's a mix of everything: social media, word of mouth, good old-fashioned internet searching.
I usually get most of my intel from friends and family.
They're like your personal news curators.
Exactly. Speaking of news curators, have you ever noticed how some headlines use really dramatic phrasal verbs?
Oh, totally.
Like, politician calls out opponent, or celebrity couple breaks up.
It's all about grabbing your attention.
Did a phrasal verb battle royale out there. Okay, we're down to our final phrasal verb for this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
It's one that can be both practical and romantic. Take out.
Ah, yes. This one has multiple personalities.
Like you can take out the trash, which is pretty straightforward.
But you can also take someone out on a date.
The guide's examples highlight this perfectly. Can you take out the trash?
For the chore-related meaning.
And he took her out for dinner last night for the dating scenario.
Two very different vibes.
The practice sentence for this one is, I took out my wallet to pay for the coffee.
A very relatable everyday action.
So when is the last time you took something out?
I think I took out my frustration on a jigsaw puzzle earlier.
Ooh, that's a good way to release some stress.
It is.
And it speaks to the figurative meaning of takeout, right?
Exactly. It can mean to remove something physically, but also to express or release something emotionally.
It's like a phrasal verb with a double life.
Which is what makes them so fascinating.
Totally. We've just scratched the surface with these 10 common phrasal verbs.
But I bet you're starting to see how they pop up everywhere.
They're like the secret ingredient to sounding more natural in English.
And the more you pay attention to them, the more you'll start to notice their nuances.
So what are your thoughts so far? Any phrasal verbs that have particularly stood out to you?
I'm ready to dive deeper.
I'm with you. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back for more phrasal verb fun.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more phrasal verb fun.
Me too. It's like we're uncovering this hidden layer of the English language.
Right. And before the break, we were talking about how they can reflect cultural nuances.
Yeah, like take someone out for a date. That's very American.
Exactly. In other cultures, inviting someone out might be phrased totally differently.
It's fascinating how these little phrases give us a glimpse into different cultures.
And even within English, phrasal verbs evolve over time, like with technology.
Oh, totally. Swipe right. That's a modern classic.
Exactly. Language is always adapting.
Okay, so we've explored this first batch of common phrasal verbs, but why are they so prevalent in English?
Well, it's partly historical. English loves combining verbs and prepositions.
It's like a linguistic Lego set.
I like that. And it allows for subtle shades of meaning.
Right, like look at versus look after. There's a difference.
Look after implies more responsibility.
Exactly. And while they can be tricky for learners, they make things easier for native speakers.
They're like shortcuts, but you have to know the code.
So it's a trade-off. Learners have to work harder, but then they unlock this fluency.
Precisely. Did you notice how some phrasal verbs cluster around certain themes?
Ooh, yeah, like a lot of these relate to daily routines.
Getting up, turning things on and off, running out of stuff.
It's like they reflect our everyday experiences.
And it makes learning them more engaging, right? You can connect them to your life.
Absolutely. It's not just memorizing lists, it's understanding how we use language in the real world.
Speaking of real-world experiences, have you ever had a phrasal verb mishap?
Ooh, let me think. Okay, this one time I was traveling in Europe, trying to order a takeaway coffee, to go.
Yeah.
But instead of saying, take this coffee to go, I said, can I take this coffee off?
Oh, no.
The barista looked at me so confused.
I can imagine.
I was so flustered, I ended up just pointing and making gestures.
It happens to the best of us.
But it taught me a valuable lesson. You have to understand the nuances of these phrasal verbs.
Context is everything.
Exactly. All right, I'm ready to dive into those new phrasal verbs you mentioned.
Let's do it.
All right, so those new phrasal verbs, you mentioned some before the break.
Yeah, they're like these little linguistic time capsules.
Capturing the zeitgeist.
Exactly. Binge watch. That's pure streaming culture.
And swipe right. Online dating in a nutshell.
It's even gone beyond dating, like swipe right to approve an idea.
I've heard that. It's amazing how language spreads.
But then there are the ones that reflect the maybe the downsides of modern life.
Like ghosting, the worst.
Yeah, it's like the digital version of disappearing.
And burnout, doom scrolling, those are heavy.
And capture that feeling of overwhelm,
Totally, like we're searching for the words to describe this modern anxiety.
Right.
But there are also some fun new ones. Level up is a good one.
Oh, yeah, that's a motivational one, like from video games.
It's about growth, progress.
Exactly, and it's playful.
And then there's adulting, which is just so relatable.
Ugh. Adulting. The millennial struggle.
It's like all those things we're supposed to know how to do.
Taxes, bills, appointment.
But we're all just figuring it out as we go.
Faking it till we make it.
And laughing about it on social media.
Exactly. Shared experiences, even if we're all adulting differently.
So what do all these new phrasal verbs tell us about the future of English?
I think they show how adaptable language is, always changing.
It's not static. It reflects how we live, how we communicate.
And phrasal verbs are a perfect example. They encapsulate trends, technology, even emotions.
It's like each one is a little snapshot of a moment in time.
What new ones will we have in 5 years, 10 years?
It's exciting to think about.
So for anyone listening, be curious about language. Pay attention to how it's used.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, to experiment.
You might even invent the next great phrasal verb.
That's the challenge I'm leaving everyone with.
Embrace the playfulness of language.
Phrasal verbs are just one small part of it, but they show how dynamic and fascinating English can be.
Exactly, and I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive.
Thanks for joining us on this linguistic adventure. Until next time, happy exploring the world of words.
Happy exploring.